Hey, what's going on everybody? Welcome back to the channel. My name's JBO and on today's episode I'm going to be putting together the turbo setup that I'm going to be running on the 3S GTE. So behind me here I've got the OEM CT26 turbo which came on the engine factory, and next to it I've got the upgraded ATS Racing Billet CT21 turbo, which is an upgraded CT20B turbo. So as it currently stands, the CT26 turbo is a pretty good turbo for the stock engine, but it's not a great turbo to stick with if you're chasing higher and higher power levels. The main sort of downfall that this turbo has is the fact that it has such a small exhaust housing and the fact that it also has a ceramic wheel. The smaller exhaust housing and ceramic wheel does mean that the turbos spool up really quick. However, in the higher RPM range, the smaller exhaust housing restricts the speed at which the wheel can spin. So this turbo will start to make boost early on in the rev range, but it can only make power up till about 5 to 5,500 RPM before it starts blowing like a hairdryer. Once you're exceeding that sort of rev range, this turbo becomes sort of real inefficient and is not sort of ideal if you're wanting to hold power all the way up to redline, which is where the CT20B turbo comes in. So in the later revisions of the 3S GTE turbo engines, Toyota made a few changes to this turbo, and the main sort of one was that they sort of increased the size of the exhaust housing and wheel a little bit. This means that the turbo can spool at the same sort of rate as the CT26 turbo, but it can hold power all the way up to redline, which this turbo here can't do. I do believe in some cases that the CT20B turbo did come with a ceramic wheel like the CT26 did. You can also get it with a steel wheel, I think, from some of the Toyota Celicas. But in this case, what I've got here is an ATS Racing Billet CT21 turbo, which is an upgraded CT20. The main sort of upgrades that this has over a standard CT20B is the fact that ATS Racing has actually machined out the inducer side of the turbo to fit a much larger billet compressor wheel, which you can see here. And if you notice between the two turbos here, the inducer on this one is considerably bigger than this one. They also went ahead and CNC machined out the exhaust housing to fit a bigger exhaust wheel in there, which will mean that the turbo can make more power for longer. The fact that this wheel has now been upgraded to a billet piece means that this turbo can safely run over 15 pounds of boost without risk of shattering the ceramic wheel that it originally came with. The CT26 turbo is sort of limited to around the 15 PSI mark before it starts not making any more power. This turbo here has been known to make well into the 20 plus pounds of boost area. I don't think I'll be running that much power, but it's nice to know that if I ever had to go that high, the turbo will be able to handle it. And to go on this new turbo here, I've actually got a set of 6 new studs to go into the exhaust housing, which I'll put on. And I've also picked up a full Toyota turbo gasket kit. This comes with a new exhaust housing gasket, a new manifold gasket, and all the seals to go for the oil and the coolant lines that are around the middle there. I've also gone ahead and stripped down both the turbos of all their parts. So I've got the coolant lines here, the wastegates, and I've got the oil feed and oil return there. Basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through and decide which pieces I like the most and then put the ones onto the new turbo that I want to keep. I'm most likely going to be keeping the wastegate that I had on my old turbo, just because I know that this one works and I don't really know the history of this wastegate here, which came on the new turbo. It will be handy to keep this one as a spare, but just for the sake of knowing that it will work first time, I'm going to go with the old wastegate. Just before I get into it, I'll just quickly show you what I've been getting up to with the engine. I've recently just chucked on the alternator and the alternator bracket here. I've also gone ahead and chucked on the engine mount brace, which sits up the front, as well as the right hand side engine mount, because this is what you have to do before you put the engine in. It won't really go back into the car otherwise unless you put the mount on. I've also gone and mounted up the fuel rail and the fuel lines, as well as the T-Vis system that sits under the T-Vis block and the intake manifold. I've actually gone ahead and put some high temp aluminium paint on all these parts here. So we've got the exhaust manifold shield, the one that sits under the manifold. We've got the firewall heat shields here. We've got the thermostat coolant housing, and the coolant tree here. So basically I went over all of these with a wire wheel, blew them all off, and then went over them with some wax and grease remover to get rid of any sort of bits that were on it. Took them outside and gave them a few coats of paint, and those should cure while the engine is at running temp, so hopefully those turn out pretty good. So let's get into it. So I finally got the turbo mounted and it looks bloody sick. I've got it loosely sitting on the exhaust manifold studs there with a couple of bolts, but this is what it looks like from the side and it looks so awesome. The wheel looks so much bigger than the stock 26 one does. I've also got the Burke 3-inch ceramic coated downpipe on there, and I've also got the brace that it comes with that mounts it to the block so it doesn't have any cracking issues. And around here you can see what it looks like from the back. This is where the oil filter goes, down here. I've also got the painted exhaust heat shield that I did, just sitting on top to see what it looks like. And having this heat shield on here honestly makes me want to paint the intake manifold, which I've got sitting here as well. I mean, this is a dirty dark grey and this is such a nice sort of lighter aluminium grey. I've also gone ahead and chucked on the boost controller, which I've got there, and I've managed to block off the turbo vacuum switching valve ports here with some rubber nipples. I did have it before with a vacuum hose with a bolt in it, but I've gone ahead and tidied that up as well. Coolant lines will line up pretty good. This one here will go to the coolant neck, which goes there, and this one here will go around to this pipe here. But all in all, I'm really happy with how this has turned out. I mean, it looks so much better than I thought it would. It looks so much nicer with all the clean parts and the new heat shield and new downpipe. There's going to be so much more room to work on this thing under here. Before, the factory catalytic converter took up all this room under here, along with the AC, which I've taken off as well. And then once the engine is back in the car, that's when I'll put on the exhaust manifold, turbo and the downpipe. The intake manifold will stay on when it goes in, but the reason for that is because that front engine mount down there I can't actually remove from the firewall because there's a bolt snapped off in there and it's sort of floating in the hole. So I sort of have to take extra measures to make sure that the engine clears that mount when it goes back in. When we were removing the engine, that front engine mount actually hit the compressor housing of the turbo, and it did sort of make the engine tilt back, which caused a bit of scuffing down there on the chassis rail, and I don't really want that to happen again. But aside from that, it's all coming together. It means I can tick a couple more things off of the list I've got going on here. I did erase a bit of it and start a new list, but that's a lot of it done, and slowly counting down the days till we get this engine back in the car. Today is Tuesday night, and I'm hoping to have this engine starting to go back in on Sunday this weekend. I've got a couple mates coming down that are going to help me out with that, and I'm real appreciative of that as well. But all in all, coming together, and I couldn't be more pleased with where I am at with this at the moment. So this is probably going to be a bit of an uninteresting video, maybe a shorter one as well. I have been sort of trying to just crack down and get as much as I can done by the end of the week. The main sort of things were getting this turbo on, getting that all set up. Next up is probably clean the transmission, which is in the background. I've got a clutch and a flywheel coming on Sunday with one of my mates, which will go on as well. But the next time that you guys see this engine, it'll probably be back in the car. I'm not sort of one to film around other people. It feels kind of awkward, I suppose, and I'm not sort of looking to document every single thing that I do. It would be good to document putting the engine back in, but ideally I sort of just want to get it done and back in the car as soon as possible. I really want to drive it again. I will sort of try to document what I can, I guess. The main thing will be getting the engine back in the car, which is going to be a bit of a tedious job, but with 2 other people helping me, it shouldn't be too bad. Basically what's going to be involved is lifting the car up, sliding this under with the one mount that it already has on it, lowering the car over it, putting the mount on, mounting the other side on where the transmission is, and then once that's done, I can go ahead and mount the turbo and the manifold, and then I'll start documenting what I do from there. It'll pretty much be stuff just like reinstalling, putting the engine loom and stuff back on, but at this stage, this is where I'm at. This is probably where it's going to be until the engine's back in the car. And I'll probably see you guys next week in the next one, but thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope to see you all next time. Peace.